I want to try to context why we're here, and then I'm going to call Alex up for the second panel. One of the scariest things that I've witnessed in my almost 40-year business career and professional career is what happened in 2008 and 2009 when our country went into recession. I never thought in my lifetime I would see anything so devastating to so many people and so across the board. And what was really scary was not only the impact that it had on everybody in the community, because I think everybody's 401k and everybody's investment portfolio dropped about 30 to 50% overnight. Didn't matter who you were. And if you were in the real estate business, you really got clobbered. Even though you didn't really do anything wrong, you were basically working on a business plan that you thought was well thought out, feasible, and moving forward. And then all of a sudden, in the middle of your execution, the world fell apart, the financial systems almost crashed, and we found ourselves in a situation saying, where do we go from here? So that was really the inspiration and the genesis for these symposia and these value creating type of ideas, because what we also found out was, and again, I'm going to do a little bit of personal opinion right now, but when I was teaching my students in 2009, early part of 2009, 2010, I started a class at the university called Real Estate Investment and Development in 2009. So it was a graduate class at the Lerner School, and we started our first class, and I said, okay, there is no investment and development in real estate right now, so what are we going to teach? And how are we going to create a really meaningful class? And the way that I did that was, I said, let's look at the world. Let's look at the real estate world, let's look at the economy, let's follow what's happening in Washington, D.C. and around the country, and let's try and figure out why can't we be the ones who come up with solutions and ideas for what went wrong and how can we recover from this horrible nuclear winter, so to speak, that we had. And so what we wound up doing is we wound up making it about current events and about what was happening in the world around us. And what we started seeing was that the way Washington, D.C. chose to attack the problem was to take care of the big banks and bail them out and give them all this money under TARP and all these other programs and say, okay, now you're going to take care of all the little smaller people and the smaller business people and everything's going to be fine. Well, no, that's not what happened. What happened was, as we've seen through history, the big banks are now alive and well and making more money than they ever have, and the rest of the country really hasn't recovered yet. We really have a lot of issues out there. People's home values are still down. The construction market is not robust, to say the least. Many communities have property values that are below replacement cost for our homes, which is usually our number one asset. And we also had a really uneven recovery, and if you think about it, if we're not in Austin, Texas, or Silicon Valley, or New York City, or Washington, D.C., or Miami, Florida, or something like that, there's a lot of places around the country that are still really hurting. And most importantly, we lost a tremendous amount of jobs, and the job loss was just devastating. 10 million plus jobs were lost. And we haven't really recovered all of those, number one. And number two, the recovery of those jobs is not going to be in the same context that it was before the recession, because companies are no longer in a position capital-wise to invest in new talent and to just bring college graduates or people on board and try and see, well, we'll decide what happens when you get here, and we'll invest in you and give you a chance to do that. So that whole dynamic came out with a clear message to me, and that is all of us as key stakeholders in the community and key leaders, we have to figure this out ourselves, because the solutions are not coming from Washington, D.C., and they're really coming from the future of our country, which is going to be all about innovation and creativity, leading the way back to economic development and job creation. So in our little corner of the world, we spend a lot of time on real estate. And why is real estate such an important factor in innovating, creating, and leading to stakeholder-led economic development through optimizing real estate? And so we're going to really talk a little bit about that today. And I think if you really think about it, what's our session overview today, now that we've had our welcomers? How could communities drive new economic development and job creation through placemaking? That's what this is all about. This is about bringing our ideas, our panelists, our talent, our energy to this community and say, how can we create new jobs and new economic development? And Secretary Schultz and Director Schultz and I were talking earlier. That's all that matters right now, is getting people to find their pathways forward, and for all of us to make sure that we're on pathways that we can feel secure and happy about. And then there's also this new phenomenon, which was really pioneered by an academic named Dr. Richard Florida. How many of you have heard of Dr. Richard Florida before? Okay, so not that many, maybe. Dr. Richard Florida coined what is called the creative class. He wrote a book called The Rise of the Creative Class. And he also just recently completed another book, which is The Rise of the Creative Class Revisited. So I think it was about 10 years apart, but I would highly recommend the book. It's really fascinating because what it is saying is that today, all of our creative energies are being manifest in how we make decisions. And that places that appeal to the creative class are going to be the ones that get more than their fair share of demand for real estate and for business and for economics. And so there's a great lesson to be learned. And if you think about the first statement that I made about real estate being the single largest component of wealth in our society, real estate should be and could be the currency for economic development. Because think about it, on a personal level, real estate is either our first or second largest asset on our personal balance sheets, right? Hopefully it's our second, and our retirement accounts are worth a lot more than our real estate is, which would be wonderful. As organizations or enterprises, it doesn't matter whether it's the state of Illinois, the city of Champaign, Illinois American Water, Prospect Bank, large companies, small companies, private equity firms, universities, healthcare organizations, and nonprofits. Real estate is typically going to be the first or second largest balance sheet item that each one of those enterprises have, and usually the second largest operating expense behind human capital. So real estate factors incredibly prominently, but yet it doesn't always get the respect that it deserves because people tend to think of real estate as houses and land and not as a strategic asset. So we're here to do a little bit of mindset changing on that as well. So when we think about placemaking and real estate and placemaking can exist at a macro level and at a micro level, and we'll explain a little bit more. Secondly, every community in America has underproductive assets, real estate assets that are sitting vacant, that are screaming for redevelopment. Now, we don't always know, and there's this concept that they teach us early on in real estate called highest and best use. So think about Champaign or the areas where you live and say, how many properties are there in your community that are not existing today at their highest and best use? What that means is they're under-optimized, and that there's huge potential to reposition or reimagine those areas into places of innovation. And that also includes our urban neighborhoods, which are struggling so much and which need so much more attention in order to create inclusive economic development for everyone. So we'll talk a little bit later about our City Lab academic practicum at Johns Hopkins, CARI, which is really revolutionary in terms of creating value in urban areas. We're also going to talk about social entrepreneurship because all of us in this room, all of a sudden, we've all become social entrepreneurs. And the younger generation and the students that are here, the level of social mission and social consciousness that I see in my young students and in young people that I meet is really incredible. They really want to do well and do good at the same time, which really drives a whole new set of value possibilities. And then creating academic symposia and graduate courses about placemaking and real estate optimization is part of my mission as an academic and as a professional, and having the honor of being in front of all of you to kind of share those insights. This is all about just connecting dots in your mind about what's possible that you just might not be thinking about, but actually makes some real interesting sense. So real estate innovation involves two primary areas: optimizing real estate assets and reimagining underproductive real estate assets. And we could spend the rest of our lives looking at that. And then we have a few business cases that we can talk about. So why is placemaking so critical today? Because the most important decision in people's lives is where they live. It's no longer job. It's no longer just where would they think they should go. It's about, I want to pick my place. What resonates with me as a person? What do I like? What do I want for my family? And then from there, people are deciding where they want and where and how they want to spend their professional and personal lives. And I think, so if you think about the growth and decline of suburban areas, there is the ability to capture demand and create demand that's not there for that particular place. And I think, so why are we here in Champaign? One of the most unique things about Champaign is you have so many amazing assets in the region, from Peoria to Springfield to all the way through to Indianapolis and up through Chicago. Think about what is within 3 hours drive of where we are right now, the entire core. So why is Austin, Texas, one of the hottest places in the United States, and Champaign is not? I want to help answer that question today with all of you. Why not Champaign versus Austin? Austin's got a major university. It's out in the middle of nowhere, Texas. So got Dallas and Houston and San Antonio. Those are the big cities, right? So they all have their sports teams and they all have all of that going on. And here's Austin. And all of a sudden, Austin has elevated up beyond all of them in terms of being a cool place. Well, there's a reason for that. It's about committed stakeholders like all of you figuring out how to tell your market story and have the type of activities and things that you heard from our welcomers as a way of creating a place-making demand and causing people to look at this area in an even more exciting way. And if you think about the creative class market segment, if you're looking at a pure market segmentation, I think the numbers are anywhere between 50 and 70 million people are now in the creative class. So how do we go about attracting them to look at this area? And as we talked about earlier, having a university and research park is number one at being able to create that type of demand from the creative class. So if you look at top 20 creative class places, what do all of them have in common? Universities, okay? That's it. They're universities. And I've been fortunate to be around most of these places, and particularly Raleigh-Durham. Raleigh-Durham's a very unique place. But with Duke and UNC and NC State and the cluster similar to what you have here in Illinois, there's not a big difference between RTP and Champaign and Central Illinois. It's just that they happen to have started their research activities earlier, but there's no reason why we shouldn't be more than competitive with those areas as well. And placemaking, to me, is the key to economic development. Because remember, people have that choice of where their place is going to be. So if you are not doing a great job of placemaking, you're not going to get that additional demand that you need to create the economic development that you're looking for. So placemaking opportunities, again, exist at 3 levels. Your regional or macro level, think of it as an umbrella. Right now, the umbrella for the Central Illinois area is you have all the way Chicago, all the way around to St. Louis, all the way around to Indianapolis and away. So you have this giant area, and people don't think twice about getting in their car and driving a couple hours in the region. So that's not an issue, is being a couple hours away. And then if you think about, so regionally, macroly, if you have Jim Schultz and Laura with the Innovate Illinois, that macro umbrella is telling the story of Illinois in a way that compels companies like Yahoo. Laura's story about Yahoo was amazing. Yahoo decided, based on all the different pieces on a macro level, that this is where they wanted to be. On a micro level, you have villages, towns, municipalities, and all of you are from different areas around the region. Each one of your municipalities and areas has the ability to do local and micro placemaking activities, which a lot of you are doing. Over in Peoria, they've got a very, very strong economic development group that's doing great things in other areas, and so are other towns. And then on an individual property level, I mean, look at Urbana, where the Lincoln Square and the hotel is, right in the heart of Urbana. How could we not be able to figure out a way to take those properties and create even greater value there and give them a highest and best use that really almost is transformational to Urbana as well? The tools are all there to do that. So let's talk a little bit about real estate, or what's our thesis. We think that if we can give you some new insights on how to reposition real estate in your towns and cities, that you will create new demand and new jobs and new economic development. Now, where does that happen? closed plant sites, empty malls, struggling mixed-use developments, former corporate headquarters, older hospital campuses where new hospitals are being built, airports. You have Rantoul and you have Champaign Municipal Airport right here. Both of them have huge chunks of land and buildings around them that are screaming for new uses and new stories and new energy. You have old schools, post offices, hotels, libraries, government or military, museums, and then urban redevelopment districts, rail yards, and brownfields. And think about, if there's one thing that's really become clear, logistics and supply chain have completely changed the dynamic of rail. Rail is now one of the hottest areas, and I guess that explains why, in the middle of the recession, Warren Buffett bought Burlington Northern for $27 billion, and now all of a sudden, 5 years later, the rail business is as hot as can be. So if you think about visionary things, and that's playing right into the strength of this central area. How do undervalued communities attract more demand? We have to stay with the concept of creating places and communities of innovation. And then how can communities and corporations collaborate on real estate innovations that foster value and entrepreneurship? And then what types of placemaking projects are there out there? So I think in terms of moving forward into panel one, this kind of sets the stage for our first panel. And Alex Ruggieri is going to come up and be the moderator for our first panel. But again, restating what we talked about, job creation is not occurring quickly enough. A big driver, corporate space utilization. Companies that used to have 150 square feet per employee are now down to 75. So every company is cutting space. Third bullet is probably the most important. University and research parks have become the future drivers of economic development and entrepreneurship. And there's a report called the Battelli Report, B-A-T-T-E-L-L-E. It was commissioned by the Association of University Research Parks. And Laura Frerichs from the research park here is now on the board of AURP. And they have incredible information in this Battelli report, which is available online, about the real drivers of entrepreneurship and economic activity. But let's not forget what we also really have to come away with as a takeaway. Undervalued urban areas are a drag on larger scale value creation. Ask Baltimore, ask St. Louis, ask any Chicago, ask any Wilmington, Delaware, where I live. Ask any of those areas, what's going to keep you from being a great place? It's going to be not including undervalued urban areas in the future of economic development and tapping into children at a very young age to get them to flow in a different direction. And so social value creation is inextricable from economic value today. And so with that, let's bring on Alex and panel one. Thank you very much.